Welcome to a special edition, Trump on Trial, Legal AF, sitting in for Ben Meiselas, Michael Popok, and with our regular anchor for this Trump on Trial early morning and recap show, Karen Friedman, Agnifilo, former prosecutor, Manhattan DA. Nobody better to talk about what happens during a trial, at least from the prosecutor's perspective, than Karen Friedman Agnifilo. And I'll try to hold my own from being a longtime criminal defense lawyer in those same courts. Let me give a little bit of an update. I think we got a little scorecard that Karen and Ben have developed for this type of show. I'll do a little riff on it, then I'll turn it over to my colleague. So we did have another day of trial, first full day of trial after the jury had been sworn. Prior to the jury coming into the room and sitting down to start hearing opening statements and oral and the first witnesses, we had the judge making what we call the Sandoval ruling, which is telling the prosecutors which of the things of Donald Trump's past bad conduct they will be able to use in cross-examining Donald Trump if and only if Donald Trump waives his Fifth Amendment privilege and takes the stand. We'll touch on that in today's show. Jury was sworn in. They all showed up. One had a little bit of a hesitation, but after some talking to privately by the judge and the lawyers, that juror sat back down, and they were given their initial charge to a what appeared to be, from courtroom watchers, a bored Donald Trump. And then we had opening statements, much shorter than I had anticipated, less than an hour for the prosecutors, although they had a very long and sordid story to tell through Matt Colangelo, who's doing the case of the opening statement for the prosecutors, and Todd Blanche doing an even shorter opening of 30 or 40 minutes, basically down to, trust me, I like our president. You should vote to acquit. Some version of that. We'll get into more details when I bring Karen on. Hey, put the board back on. Then we got David Pecker taking the stand, who's the National Enquirer publisher, former National Enquirer publisher, who will really be a great roadmap witness when he gets going. They got about an hour under their belt with David Pecker, but some already a rapt jury paying attention, taking notes. Trump lawyers will talk about their opening statements. Basically, the takeaway is, you know what you call trying to influence an election? We call that democracy. As a sarcastic, sardonic Todd Blanche, I don't know if this is working with the jury or not, tried to goof his way through his opening. Then the court adjourned for the day early because a juror had some sort of prior engagement. And during the Todd Blanche opening, they attacked Michael Cohen. The prosecutors spoke about Michael Cohen. We'll talk about all that here. And then Donald Trump decided to attack Michael Cohen. All that and more on the fifth day of trial, the Trump trial. Let's bring in Karen Friedman Agnifilo. Karen, take it away. You're on a short budget today, so why don't you take it away and give our audience everything that you saw today, and then I'll weigh in afterwards.
Yeah, so the biggest takeaway I had from today is how Judge Merchan controlled his courtroom. Donald Trump is not acting out at all or acting up. He's absolutely behaving. He's sitting still. He isn't making noises and grimaces in front of the jury like he's been reported to have done in other cases. So I think he's learned his lesson, and it really shows that Donald Trump, that there's a way to control him, and then there's a way to be in charge of a courtroom. And that's what Judge Merchan is doing, and that's what he's known for. He's known for really just keeping a tight ship. He got open. Today was supposed to be off. It's Passover. And instead he's like, nope, we're going to just break early. And we are getting started. And we are already seeing our first witness. So he is going to run this trial as fast as he possibly can, the way he would any other case. And he's not going to allow delays. He's not going to allow anything to cause this to go off the rails. I was pleasantly surprised that there were no real jury issues this morning. I thought for sure there was a possibility, given that they had the weekend to think about it, to have people ask them, oh, you're on jury duty. What case are you on? They're not supposed to say anything, but some people can surmise what case it is. And so people sometimes get cold feet. I know some of the lawyers, it was reported that the lawyers on the jury, that the law firms that they work for, that came out over the weekend. So I was concerned that there could be some jury issues, that people having second thoughts, but not really. There was one juror who had a slight issue, I guess, or a slight concern, they went in the back, they talked to the judge, and the jury sat for the case, and that was that. So then, as you pointed out, the judge ruled his Sandoval ruling, and on Sandoval, that's where if the defendant, Donald Trump, wants to take the stand and testify, the prosecution is required to tell or to ask permission to cross-examine a defendant on any prior bad acts. So anything involving the case is fair game, but any other bad acts, anything that has nothing to do with the case, if he's testifying, you want to cross-examine him, right? About what are bad things he's done in the past, lies that he's told, that sort of thing, because that's relevant. His credibility, if he testifies, is obviously relevant. So the judge, the prosecution last week filed a Sandoval motion and said these are the things we'd like to talk about, and the judge ruled most of them can come in, and it mostly has to do with his civil cases and findings in his civil cases, like he violated the gag order in Judge Angoran's court, and that he has these judgments against him in E. Jean Carroll. There was one that the judge ruled was a bridge too far, and that had to do with a finding of a frivolous lawsuit that he filed against Hillary Clinton. That the judge found that the prosecution was not going to be allowed to talk about that. The other thing the judge said was, I am not going to revisit my ruling that the Access Hollywood tape doesn't come in, but the content, you can talk about it. The emails surrounding it can come in, just not the tape itself. And then once they got those things out of the way, as you said, the jury was sworn, and then the judge read the charge to the jury. And those are the initial charges where the judge explains what the trial is going to be and explains how it's going to go and who has the burden of proof. Of course, it's only the prosecution, who they call the people, and that the people have to give an opening statement, and you'll hear from them. You may hear from the defense, which here we did, but they weren't required to. Things like argument is not permitted in an opening statement. And then they talked a little bit about, the judge talked about things like, you're going to hear people say objection. Some will be sustained, some will be overruled. He explains what that means, etc. So the judge gave all of the various background and things that a jury needs to know. Things like don't listen to media coverage and that sort of thing. So the judge gave his initial instructions that last usually around 30 minutes. And then we got to opening statements, and opening statements I thought were pretty powerful. Matt Colangelo gave the opening, which I think was surprising to some people. He's somebody who we don't hear from a lot about him. We hear a lot about Joshua Steinglass and Susan Hoffinger, who are the two lead lawyers. But it's clear that Matt Colangelo, who's also on the team, is also one of the lead lawyers. So he opened for the prosecution. And he basically, I wrote down a few things that I wrote down a few parts of the opening that I thought were pretty powerful. So when calling this a conspiracy and a cover-up it was a conspiracy to influence the election and a cover-up. I thought that was really powerful. And I thought he did a really good job also of talking about and putting this in context of how this was all surrounding Trump's candidacy. It was right after he announced his candidacy, and that this was election fraud, pure and simple. He talked about how this was a three-pronged scheme that involved catch and kill, attacking opponents, and that you're going to hear from co-conspirators David Pecker and Michael Cohen. His name escaped me for a second there, and that those are co-conspirators who you're going to hear from, and you're also going to hear how Trump thanked David Pecker for doing these catch and kill schemes for him and helping him with the election, so much so that he invited him to the White House to thank him. So I thought that the prosecution opening was very good. He talked about Michael Cohen and issues with Michael Cohen, and talking about how he's made some mistakes in the past. I think that they're trying to take the sting out of the Michael Cohen testimony and the fact that he pled guilty to lying in the past. So that's going to be something that the prosecution wanted to get out up front. And then the defense opened. They opened right out of the gate, he's innocent. Pretty strong statement to say that someone's innocent, as opposed to they're not guilty, which is, there's a difference, right? Because a lot of defense attorneys hedge and will say, oh, the prosecution's not going to be able to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt, so you're going to have to come back and say, find he's not guilty. That's different than saying he is innocent. He is innocent of this case. And when you do that, I think you risk the jury is going to want to hear proof of his innocence. Okay, you said he's innocent. That's a bold statement. I want to hear about that. And he doesn't have a burden of proof. But to me, it makes it seem like they are seriously considering Trump testifying, and that's how he will establish his innocence. He also, you alluded to this, Popok. He said there's nothing wrong with influencing an election. It's called a democracy. So he put his defense out front and center. He says that Trump fought to protect his family and his brand. And Stormy Daniels, he denies that affair. It was nothing more than a sinister attempt to embarrass Trump and his family. And so he basically throws everything onto Cohen. He's saying, look, Cohen was my lawyer. He was a criminal of his own right. You'll hear all about that, all the stuff that he did. And I didn't know that he was setting this up this way. I relied on my experts. And so he's going to, I think, really put this all on Michael Cohen. And then we got to the prosecution's case. It was David Pecker who testified for the prosecution. It was very short because they had to end early today. They had to end at 12:30 in order to accommodate a scheduling issue with one of the jurors who had to go to the dentist, I believe. And you could tell by the way Josh Steinglass was questioning David Pecker that he was trying to get him to feel comfortable, because look, David Pecker and Donald Trump go way back. They've had a business relationship and a personal relationship for decades. And this was David Pecker walking into the same courtroom as Donald Trump. Donald Trump it was reported, was looking at him. And of course, David Pecker would look at Donald Trump and was testifying under oath. He was granted immunity federally. So he couldn't be prosecuted for these crimes in the state either, because of the supremacy clause. So a federal grant of immunity for crimes involving illegal campaign donations will trickle down to the state. And so that's the state of things. That's the state of things with David Pecker. And so the prosecutor, Josh Steinglass, who has a lot of experience, is going to want to get him to feel comfortable and is going to want to get him to really be able to explain things. And so he's going to ask him some questions to get him talking, get him feeling comfortable. And then he will get to some hard questions tomorrow. So tomorrow, the jury's coming back at 11. They're going from 11 to 2 tomorrow with the jury. So that's when David Pecker is going to be testifying. I think you're not even going to get through his direct tomorrow. I don't think he'll be on cross-examination yet, but we could get to his cross-examination. But I highly, highly doubt it. And in the morning will be the gag order hearing, where we're going to see if Judge Merchan is going to hold Donald Trump in violation of the gag order, because the prosecution did an order to show cause, if you recall, in order to show cause to hold him in contempt. So that'll be interesting tomorrow to see, will Donald Trump be warned or will he be held in contempt? If he's held in contempt, what next? But Donald Trump was on his best behavior today, which I was pleased to see. Also, interestingly, Trump gave a couple of speeches the way he does, both on his way in and out of court. And he spent more time talking about the other thing that's been going on today that I know you've been doing hot takes on, Popok, about the Judge Engoron bond and the $175 million bond that the judge is that the Attorney General is asking the judge to reject the Knight insurance company. And Donald Trump is just obsessed because he keeps talking about it. More, like I said, more than he's talking about the criminal case and David Pecker, which I thought was kind of interesting. What did you make of that?
Yeah, I'll do it backwards. I know you're pressed for time, so I may hang out a little bit longer after you leave.
Yeah,
Uh,
unfortunately, I'm gonna have to run.
all
So,
right, I'll take
um,
it.
yeah, I'm gonna leave this to you, but I love doing this with you, Pope. I hope we do. I'm
Yeah, we
sorry that I
will.
have to run.
No
Okay.
problem. Good luck. We know why.
Okay. Okay.
So to pick up where Karen left off, the bond hearing, yeah, it makes him upset. I think he focused on it because the reporting from the room today inside of the trial courtroom, the criminal trial courtroom, is that Donald Trump was none too pleased about the way things went, the way the opening statements landed on the ears of the jury. The jury's rapt attention, as we expected, when Matt Colangelo for the Manhattan DA laid out in elegant but efficient detail the entirety of what their argument is going to be about the criminal conspiracy that was hatched at Trump Tower. They're calling it the Trump Tower conspiracy. And there's three participants in the conspiracy, two of which the jury are definitely going to hear from Michael Cohen and David Pecker, who's already up on the stand. And two out of three people are going to tell you what happened during that particular hearing. The bond hearing went in the favor of ultimately, I believe, the New York Attorney General. I don't know why Trump's all upset. He's got to put in a locked cash box the 175 million to back the bond. The Judge Engoron, brokered the whole deal. I got a hot take going up with a former Manhattan Supreme Court Justice, Justice Barbara Jaffe, who's also a friend of Judge Engoron and was in the courtroom today for the hearing. You'll see all the detail on that. Going back to some of the things that Karen touched on, and to kind of fill in the blanks a little bit or fill in the gaps a little bit. Opening statement I thought was amazing by Matt Colangelo, and there's going to be a lot, as we've anticipated on Legal AF. There's going to be a lot more text messages, emails, cell phone records, recordings secretly recorded primarily by Michael Cohen, who didn't trust his then client Donald Trump, that are all going to be coming into evidence. I mean, when David Pecker was only on the stand for an hour, but when he was asked, and Mr. Pecker, what was your cell phone number back in this 2016, 2017 period? That's not just idle chit chat between Matt Colangelo and David Pecker or a memory test. That's because they're going to be putting up in front of the jury cell phone records that show the phone conversations and the length of the phone conversations as they make their case and all of the evidence. So lots of what I got out of the openings from Matt Colangelo is we're going to be seeing a lot of text messages, a lot of cell phone, a lot of other messages and recordings. Michael Cohen, yes, was a presence in the openings for both sides. Matt Colangelo had to do what the prosecutors we knew were going to do. They had to anticipate some of the attacks on Michael's credibility for having been convicted of crimes in the past and his role in all of this. In fact, one of the crimes he was convicted of was related to Stormy Daniels and the payoff and election fraud related to that, or election violations related to that. And so Matt did the right thing. He has to say Michael Cohen is a challenged individual. Sometimes he's been, he doesn't tell the truth, but everything that Michael Cohen is going to say in the courtroom is going to be corroborated for you by other witnesses who you can't doubt the veracity. And that's what we always thought, that Michael Cohen was not like the linchpin for the entire prosecution, because almost everything Michael can say is going to be corroborated. David Pecker is going to corroborate and bolster Michael Cohen's testimony before Michael Cohen even sees the inside of a courtroom, which could be a week or two or three away. By the time Michael Cohen takes the stand, all these other witnesses, as outlined by the prosecution, will have already testified. And so what we say about in trial practice, what we say in your opening is that you are writing checks that you have to cash before that trial is over. And if you write checks that you can't cash the way that Todd Blanche did in his opening, then the prosecution will make them pay for it, will remind the jury in the closing arguments in 4 or 5 weeks that you were promised this in the opening. Here's Mr. Blanche's opening. This is what he told you would happen. And that's not what happened in this courtroom. Make them pay. And I agree with Karen. I found it odd that Todd Blanche was doing two things that were inappropriate. First of all, there was a lot of places where he was so inappropriate, prosecution had to jump up and object. I rarely object during opening statements. It sort of looks bad to the jury unless you really, really have to. But prosecutors really, really had to, because there were times I believe that Todd Blanche was verging into the thing There's a golden rule. There's a number of golden rules in trial practice that you can't violate. One of them is you can't vouch for your own client. You and Blanche was very close to saying that I'm a New Yorker, you're a New Yorker, this New Yorker thinks Donald Trump is innocent. You should think you can't do that in your opening statement. First of all, it's not argument. It's supposed to be statement about what the evidence is going to show. You're not supposed to say, see that guy over there? The guy with the big red tie that pays my bills? He's innocent. You're not allowed to say that. And there were times where he crossed the line and almost came close to crossing the line, and the prosecutors had to stand up, and their objections were sustained in a number of different ways. But it almost, as Karen said, almost like flipped the burden, which I thought was odd. I mean, one of the advantages you have as a defendant or a lawyer handling a defendant in a criminal case is the burden's on the other person. The burden's on the prosecution completely. I don't have to prove a darn thing to you. They have to prove all of the case beyond a reasonable doubt. They got to go 12-0 with a jury. I only have to go 1 for 12. But he said, we will prove his innocence. Now, whether that does anticipate Donald Trump taking the stand or not, now knowing what's going to happen when he takes the stand, and I'll talk about that for a minute too, I'm not sure. But Todd Blanche was a little, for my taste, and we'll have to find out from the jury when they deliberate and they enter their verdict and then they're interviewed or write books. I thought he was a little too hokey and jokey. It was a little too much. Oh, the catch and kill program. Isn't that a fun name for something? No, it's not a fun name for something. If the prosecution is right, it's a criminal conspiracy. And the catch and kill wasn't the prosecutor's name for it. It was Donald Trump, David Pecker, and Michael Cohen's name for it. And the first thing to whet the appetite of the jury, and according to courtroom watchers, because we weren't in the courtroom today, according to courtroom watchers, the jury is taking copious notes. They're allowed to take notes and use those notes and their deliberation. They keep their pads private, so to speak. They don't share it with their neighbor. And they were like leaning forward, not back, during some very comprehensive, detailed roadmap presented by Matt Colangelo in the opening. And then when David Pecker, and after you hear about David Pecker, and then he takes the stand, I thought, and this is very smart, one of the things that you don't want to do is bore the jury. So you don't want to start with, tell us about your educational background starting in high school. Oh, that's like flatlining the jury. You want to start with something aggressive, especially if you know you only have an hour. You got to get, you got to get their attention, grab them by the lapels and shake them up after those opening statements. And they did. They got already in the first hour, they've got him to talk about checkbook journalism, a phrase I had never heard before. But now it's like an earworm that will not leave the jury forever. And what it means is the National Enquirer practiced checkbook journalism. They paid for stories, whether they were true or false or whatever. That stands in stark contrast already to a check that Todd Blanche wrote in his opening to the jury, where he said, the National Enquirer is just a legitimate media organization. They make editorial decisions all the time about, we have no influence over that. And then cut to David Pecker. We practice checkbook journalism. We pay off people. And you know where this is going. Checkbook journalism means we're not really a legitimate news organization. We were a conduit for Donald Trump's conspiracy. I met with Donald Trump in Trump Tower. I became the eyes and ears of the conspiracy. My job was to catch bad stories about Donald Trump's sex acts and kill them by paying them off. And we're already 1 hour into his testimony, and we've got that out there. As to the, let me leave it on this. As to the Sandoval ruling, because it'll kind of get lost in the fog of all the information that happened today. It's important. We call it Sandoval. It's based on the name of a case. The prosecution has to tell the defense before the trial starts what they intend to use in cross-examination as prior uncharged crimes or bad acts if the defendant waives his Fifth Amendment privilege and testifies. Doesn't have to do that, but if he does, this is what you face. Now, it was a Christmas list of things that there was no way the prosecutors thought they were going to get all of this list. So let me tell you the handful of things that are going to be able to be used in cross-examination and those that aren't, that kind of got cut on the cutting room floor. Let me start with those. The 17-count criminal conviction of the Trump organization entities, the payroll entity and the Trump company, for tax evasion and books and records fraud. And everyone's like, yeah, that's exactly what they're doing here. Right. That's why it's not going to come in as evidence, because the probative value, the value of it as relevant evidence, is outweighed by the prejudicial value, the impact on the jury. So that's out. Even though Mershon presided over it, and overlapping witnesses not coming in. Jury's not going to hear testimony about, if cross-examination about that conviction of Donald Trump's companies. They're not going to hear about the sexual assault on E. Jean Carroll that led to the defamation and punitive damages case. They are going to hear about the punitive damages and defamation, but they're not going to be told about that sexual misconduct / rape of E. Jean Carroll. Again, on a balancing test, the judge finding as a gatekeeper that's too prejudicial to go to the jury to try to decide on these crimes. So that's not going in. Judge Middlebrook's $1 million fine penalty against Trump and Alina Habba, who was in the courtroom today, for a bad faith filing, a vindictive filing down in Florida against Hillary Clinton in a lawsuit. That's not coming in. But everything that Judge Engoron ruled in the New York Attorney General civil fraud case for 13 weeks, the $465 million judgment, all the fraud against Donald Trump, him violating the gag order, his finding that Donald Trump lied under oath, all of that is coming in. So that's coming in. And the fact that Donald Trump's foundation had to be dissolved because of fraud brought by the New York Attorney General years ago, that comes in. But the rest of it is not coming in. The 17-count conviction and all of that, and the actual sexual attack on E. Jean Carroll. The Access Hollywood tape, the tape didn't come in, but in opening statement, it was allowed to be read out loud, the transcript, the now infamous, I can get away with grabbing a woman's genitalia because I'm a celebrity. That whole 5-minute clip, that got used by the prosecutors today against Donald Trump, leaving, and I thought it was, I'll just leave it on this. I thought it was very weird that, knowing that David Pecker was the first witness, Todd Blanche spent almost no time trying to undermine David Pecker. He spent all of his goodwill, such as it is, with the jury to go after Michael Cohen. And then even afterwards, as Karen said, they didn't even go after Michael Cohen. They want to. Donald Trump used this whole time to talk about the bond that's now been, I think, put back in place to stop the collection against him. So look, we appreciate you joining us. We're doing this early because trial ended early. We're back tomorrow. It'll be Karen and Ben, I'm sure, back tomorrow. I'll try to jump in where I can. Remember the trial schedule. Mondays, Tuesdays, trial. Wednesday, dark day, meaning the judge does other things and the lawyers do too. Thursday, Friday, trial days. Sometimes they go all the way to 4:30, 5 o'clock. Sometimes they end early. The judge tells you in advance. Big highlights for tomorrow that'll be covered by Ben and Karen in the morning before the trial starts are going to be that there's going to be a gag order violation contempt hearing tomorrow with the lawyers in court. Now, no jurors present at 9:30 in the morning, the jury being told to come back at 11, assuming that hearing is over. And we may have a ruling from Judge Mershon tomorrow about whether Donald Trump is going to get fined and or jailed for his at least a dozen different violations of the gag order. And then they'll go to trial tomorrow till 2, and we'll pick back up with it. If you like what we're doing here, we have a show we call Legal AF on the Midas Touch Network. You know, you're right here now. Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We put together and curate the top 5 developments at the intersection of law and politics. Wednesday, I do the show with Karen Friedman, Agnifilo. Saturday, I do it with Ben Mycelis. And then we do hot takes and live streams like this one wherever we can on breaking stories. So we appreciate you being here. Until my next hot take, Legal AF and everything else, this is Michael Popok with Karen Friedman, Agnifilo reporting.
Enough! Send it to the big house, not the White House. Get the new exclusive tees, mugs, and stickers right now at store.midastouch.com. That's store.midastouch.com.